Today we're going to be doing lesson 754, and this has to do with using money and debt and using addition and subtraction and positive and negative numbers to represent this. So the first thing, just try out this page. This is a warm up, and this is about Priya, and she's buying tickets for her and her friends with the money that she earns at her part-time job. This month, she earned $135. Can she buy three $50 tickets for a concert? Yes or no? And then you're going to answer 1, 2, and 3 the best you can. How could you represent the amount of money that Priya has after buying the tickets? How much more money will Priya need to earn to pay back the money she borrowed from the bank? And how much money will she have after she pays back the money she borrowed from the bank? So, these questions down here kind of give you an idea of what's happening up here. Um, if we're looking at this, we have to figure out, could she buy three concert tickets for $50 a piece? Well, to figure that out, we're going to have to solve what is 50 times 3, right? 50 times 3. So maybe you also used repeated addition. There's a lot of different ways you could do this. I would use multiplication. And you could put it in a calculator, or you could rely on your good old brain, which sometimes can be faster. So when I look at this problem, I actually see the problem 3 times 5. And so I know 3 times 5 is 15. But I also know I'm not multiplying 3 just by 5, I'm multiplying it by 50. And so that means that 50 is 5 times 10, right? So since I already multiplied 3 by the 5, now I multiply it by the 10. Basically, we're adding on that 0 on the end. So I know it's going to cost her $150, and she does not have $150. So therefore, the answer is no. Now, while this is kind of a weird situation, people could borrow money from a bank if they don't have money to pay for something. Typically, you're not going to borrow money from a bank to go to a concert, but we'll go with the problem as it is written. So it's saying, how could you represent the amount of money that Priya has after buying the tickets? I'm thinking if she purchased money, or if she borrowed money, I actually think that Priya is going to use negative numbers to have a negative amount of money. And I know that because if the concert tickets cost $150 and she only had 135, she actually had to borrow money, which means that at the end of the day, she would have owed money. And that's how I know I would use a negative number to represent that. And we do use negatives to represent debt. Now, next, how much more money will Priya need to earn to pay back the money she borrowed from the bank? So basically, they're saying, well, she borrowed $150. She had 135 to start with. So, how much money does she need to pay back the rest? I know I'm going to have to subtract here, right? Um, to see what's the difference between what she had and what she needed. So when I subtract, there's lots of ways you can do this, right? You could use good old subtraction, like so. Maybe you can solve this in your head without even doing any of that, right? So I know she ended up needing $15. So I'm going to write that in. Oops. Okay. The next part to this is, how much money will she have after she pays back the money she borrowed from the bank? Well, I'm assuming she borrowed the $15, so if she pays them back, she's not going to owe anything. So 0. She won't owe anything. Okay. Let's move on and see what's going to happen next. Okay, so here we're just kind of exploring. Um, we have deposits. We have the word deposit. We have the word withdraw. Okay, these are words that you're going to have to know in order to solve these problems. Um, so let's kind of take a look. We also have a picture to kind of show what's happening too, right? So in the banking world, the word deposit, that's when you're putting money in the bank, right? So just by looking here, this looks like you're putting money into a bank, right? So I'm going to match that up. And let's see, it's either money taken out of an account or money paid into an account. Well, it's not money being taken out. So a deposit is when you put money into an account, and then a withdrawal is the opposite of that. It's when you have to take money out. So what Priya did would have been a withdrawal, right? Taking money out. We'll be using those words. Okay, so good. We sorted them all correctly. So let's take a look at the next slide. All right. For all of these slides, or for the next problems on this slide, we're doing the same thing. We're going to be writing an equation for what's happening in the situation and then solving for the unknown or the variable. So we're going to be using variables again, which, remember, variables are letters that we use to represent something we don't know. Okay? So let's take a look at this first one. Cafeteria food debt. At the beginning of the month, Karan had $24 in his school cafeteria account. For each scenario, we're using a variable to represent the unknown, right? And variable, that's just a letter. Transaction, okay? A transaction is usually something that we call, if you're buying or selling something, that would be a transaction, right? We have to write an equation. So an equation has an equal sign and it has to represent the situation. So situation is what's happening. And then we have to solve for the unknown quantity. Quantity is just a fancy way of saying number. So in the first week, he spent $16 on lunches. So when I'm reading this, I'm remembering a couple things. I know he started with $24, right? And then it says he spent 16. Okay. So how much money was in the account then? To me, the question is what we're looking for. That's going to be our variable. All right. That's always going to be the variable, the question that you're looking for. All right. So in this case, let's see here. I'm actually going to start with the equation. All right. So I know he started with $24. I know that he took out or spent $16. So there's two ways you could write that. You could either say he started with 24, he took out, subtracting is taking away, $16, right? And he gets something. I don't know, let's say we'll use an M for money because he has money left over, right? We don't know this amount. Okay, so this is one way you could do it. Or you might consider using addition. And we'll start the same way, $24. And then to that, we're going to add on the amount he spent. And since he's spent it, that's a negative, right? That's like debt in a way. He's not using that money, and it's going to equal the money. All right, so either one of these would be correct. Most of my students use the subtraction for this. So I know that the M, the variable, stands for, well, it's going to answer the question, right? It's how much money was in his account after he spent lunch for that week, right? So we are going to just explain that, right? It's the money left in his account, right? That's what it is. We're telling it in words. And then value of the unknown quantity. That's just saying, what does M equal? All right. So we simply have to solve for M. So 24 minus 16. What is 24 minus 16? Okay. Lots of ways to do that too. You could do your standard subtraction. Okay. I kind of do this in my head and I do it a little differently than this. which is fine if you do it this way. It's fine if you do it my way. I always do 24, and then I would start, and again, this is in my head. I don't actually write this out, but I would do 24 and I take the 10 off first from the 16. So 24 minus 10, I do that easily because I know, oh, it's just taking 110 away here. So I know I'm with 14, and then I still have to take 6 from 14. So 14 minus 6, well, that's a fact I already know, and that's 8. So I know the unknown quantity is $8. So I'm going to type that in. All right, so my answer was 8. And now we're ready to move on. I'm going to go ahead and clear what I did up here. Well, I guess I don't need to. All right. So here we go. It's okay. So then he deposited some more money and his account balance was 28. How much did he deposit? So here's the thing with this. We actually are going to follow this as a story, right? So we now know after the first situation, he has $8 in his account. So we're going to use that for our starting amount. So we know his starting amount is 8 because that's what he was left with, right? So I'm just going to put this to remind myself of that. So, and again, I'm going to write my equation first because let's see here. Well, I guess I don't have to. My variable stands for what? And remember, we're using the variable to figure out the unknown. And the unknown in these cases are almost always going to be the question. So the question says, how much did he deposit? Well, that means my variable stands for the amount he deposited or the amount he put into his account. You could put it that, you could say it that way too, right? Because remember from before, deposit means money you're putting in. So now we're going to write an equation to represent the situation, right? So we know he started with $8, right? And then he deposited, and depositing is adding. So he added some money. We don't know how much. That's our unknown, right? It's the amount he put in. And after he did that, it tells us here his new balance was $28. So we know that that equaled $28 after his deposit. So the question now that we have to solve for is, what is this number? What do we have to add to 8 to get 28? Okay. Again, there's lots of ways you could solve this. I can do this mentally because I know that I just add $20 to 8 to get 28. Maybe you're not quite there yet, and that's fine. Another way you can solve for this, right? The opposite. How do you undo addition? We do subtraction. This is kind of like our proportional relationships. So we know 28, if we take 28 and we take away that $8, that's going to give us a number, and that's going to be the missing number, right? So 8 plus that number is 28. Answer 20. Okay. And again, we're going to use that ending amount as our new starting amount, right? So well, I guess we have to remember the amount in his account isn't $20, it's $28, right? So for this next one, again, I'm just going to remind myself the starting amount is 28 for this problem. Okay. So then he spent $34 on lunches the next week. How much money was in his account then? Okay, I'm already noticing something. I don't know, maybe you're noticing something, but let's answer our question. My variable stands for, because we're going to write an equation, the variable is going to be our unknown. In this case, we know the unknown is the question, right? So how much was in his account? That's what the variable stands for. So we're going to say, it's not a question, but we'll answer it. My variable stands for the money in his account at the end, right? And the equation, well, we know he started with $28 Okay. And again, this is going to have two possible answers. We know that he spent. If you spend money, it's the same thing as taking away money, right? So we know he spent $34. This is a subtraction problem, or there's another way of writing it. Whoops, actually, I forgot my, yikes, where's my eraser? I forgot the equals, we'll say M, right? So we can do that, or we could write it as an addition problem. So we know that we're still starting with a positive $28, but to that, spending 34, that's the same thing as spending, that's a negative 34, right? So we could add negative 34. Adding negative 34 is the same as subtracting positive 34 anyway. But now we have to figure this out. What is the answer? Well, remember what we just said. If we're doing 28 minus 34 to solve for this, equals M, it's the same thing as adding the opposite, right? That's how we do problems like this. We know that it's adding the opposite because a lot of times it's easier for us to see these addition problems, which is this one here, right? So if you have 28 positives and 34 negatives, we actually know our answer is going to end up in the negative, isn't it? Because we have more negatives. He took out more money than he had, right? So the value, the answer here is going to be negative. And then how much money does he owe? Okay, so what's the difference between 34 and 28? I know it's going to be a 6. Okay. Okay, and we have one more to solve on this particular page. Okay, so we actually know that right now his starting amount is negative 6. So he has negative $6 in his account. Okay, and so now it says he deposited enough money to pay off his debt to the cafeteria. How much did he deposit? Okay, so we know, again, the variable is going to be the unknown. In this case, your question is what you don't know. So the deposit, it says how much did he deposit? So the variable stands for the amount he deposited. Whoops. Okay. And let's go ahead and write an equation for this. So we know he started with negative 6, right? We know that he added some money. We don't know how much, but we also know he paid off his debt. So we have to know that if you pay off your debt, you don't owe money, but you also don't have money. So really you end up with 0, right? So how much money did he have to pay to get negative 6 to go to 0? There's lots of different ways you could do this. You could think of a number line, right? Here's 0, here's negative 6. What do we have to add to negative 6 to end up at 0? Positive 6, right? So we know the unknown value is positive 6. Okay, we can go ahead and hit submit. All right, we are ready to go on to the next one. On this one, we are sorting the number lines with the equation cards, right? So I'm just gonna, I guess it doesn't matter. Sometimes I like to match these up like this to kind of have everything together. Look, I'm thinking these are actually the ones that we had already done. So let's take a look. On this one, I know we're going to use the bottom line, right? The one that starts at 0 is the first number. And so I'm looking at this one and I know we start at 0 and we go to 28. So the very first thing I'm going to do is just look for one. Is there one that goes and starts with 28? There is. Can we double check and see? Does it add negative 34? If it starts at 28 and goes all the way down to negative 6, it does indeed add negative 34. That's the first problem that we had, or it's not the first problem. It's one of the last problems we solved, right? Let's look at this one. It starts at 0 and it ends at 8. So it starts at 0 and ends at positive 8. And then it looks like it got more positives added on, and the answer is 28. So let's see. Do we have that somewhere? Where we start with an 8, we add a number and end at 28. Well, I'm looking at this one, right? We started with 8, we added this much, and ended up at 28. So this matches up. Okay, let's look at this one. We start at 0 and go to 24, right? Then we added on a number that's negative, right? Because it's going all the way back to 8. So a number that we start with 24 plus something is 8. Do we have that? I think we do, right? 24 plus something is 8. And that does look like it matches up with this negative 16, right? So then this one must be 0, the one that ends at 0, and lo and behold, it is, right? Negative 6, then we added a positive 6, and we ended up at 0. Makes me feel confident in what we did on the other page, right? Okay, so good. We matched up all our numbered lines, and we're good to go. Okay, so for this one, we're asked, what do you notice and what do you wonder? So I just want you to take a minute to notice and wonder some things. Hit pause, go ahead and type in. What are you noticing on this? Now, I am pretty familiar with this type of an item. It says it's a checking account statement, right? So a checking account is an account that you can put money in, remember deposits, and you can take money out, withdrawals. And we often use, well, maybe not so much anymore, but checks or you know, online banking. A lot of times, like here, we have online banking. So we're seeing there's some withdrawals and we have deposits and then a balance, right? So let's see what we're going to do with these. All right, if we put the withdrawals and deposits in the same column, because notice they're all in different columns, right? How would we represent them? So I want you to think about that. What if we made the withdrawals and the deposits in one column? How would you show which ones are withdrawals and which ones are deposits? I know we're going to use positives, right? Positive numbers would represent the deposits, right? And negative numbers represent the withdrawals. Okay. So now we know Andre withdrew $40 to buy a music player. What is the new balance? Okay, so we know here it looks like the balance he was starting with was this, right? So he started with negative $62.47, and then he withdrew $40. So that means in this case, we're going to use this as an addition problem. So it's adding negative 40. I guess that's one way we could put it, right? Or you might consider thinking about this as negative 62.47 minus $40, right? But adding a negative is the same thing as subtracting a positive. All right, so what's his new balance? Well, in order to solve this, all right, we could look at it this as, oh, look, I'm adding two negatives. Or perhaps you think of it as a number line. Here's 0. Let's say that this is negative 62.47. And then he takes away 40 positives. Well, that means he's going to continue getting further into debt, right? Going further into the negatives. So we're actually going to add those together. And we're going to get 102.47. Now I did that real quick. Oh, whoops. I'm actually not correct. It's negative, right? Because he owes that money. So it's negative 102.47. So you could remember, you have to know you can add these numbers together, the two negatives, right? Because if you're starting with a negative and you're going further into debt, that number is going to get bigger. So if he borrows or if he deposits, so deposit means puts in to his account $100, will he still be in debt? Okay. This is what his new balance is. Will $100 cover it? No, right? And how do I know that? Well, I know that he will still owe $2.47, right? Because $100 is only going to take care of 100 of this. There's still going to be that $2.47 left. Okay. All right. So I want you to explain to me, why does it make sense to use a negative number to represent an account balance when someone owes money? So I just want you to tell me what you're thinking about that. And that's where we're going to end today. So finish up that and then you are good to go.